All right, this is Math 209, Week 2, Section 6.4, Factoring. Still going to be using that box method. So, first rule of factoring is when you have your, let's say we've got 4x squared minus 36. The first rule is to factor out a common factor. So we're going to look here, and we see that in both cases we can factor out a 4. So if I factor out a 4, I get x squared minus 9. So that's the thing, what I mean by factoring out the 4. So we have x squared minus 9. Now this, we are going to use the box. All right, and the box is going to go over here, and we see that the x squared goes here. We see the negative 9 goes there. And now we can kind of quickly see this is going to be easy. This is x and x, so x squared. X times x is x squared. We have the 9 here. We're going to temporarily ignore the sign. And since we have no middle term, these guys have to cancel out. So that means we know that 3 times 3 gives us 9. And so we've got right here 3x, and we've got 3x, but we need these guys to cancel out. That means we need one of them to be negative and the other to be positive. That makes this a negative 3, this a positive 3. And so sure enough, there's our factoring. So the fully factored form is 4 times x plus 3 times x minus 3. So that is your factored form. So backtracking here, first thing we did was we took out a 4, which was common factor of 4, and then we took this portion, this binomial, and put it into our box and used the box to factor further. So that is our simplest form. So again, first thing we need to do is we need to factor out a common term or a common factor, and I see that the 3 appears to be the common factor. So that gives us n squared minus 12n plus, what is that, 36. All right. So now we're going to take this trinomial and factor using the box method. And so as you recall, n squared goes here, 36 goes here. We definitely know n times n gives us n squared. So we have to think about what times what gives us 36. And so I'm thinking, well, 9 times 4, but 9 times 4 is 36, but that gives us 13, and I don't want 13. Let's see, 12 times 3, no, that's no good. 3 times 12, no. Oh yeah, so duh. So we've got 6 and 6. So 6 times 6 gives us 36, so that means now we're going to put in, right now we're temporarily ignoring the signs. Now what we're looking at, we know we want negative 12n, so we're going to put in a negatives right here. And since those are negatives, that means this has to be a negative 6 and this has to be a negative 6, and so there. And so our factored form is 3 times n minus 6 times n minus 6, and that is our factored form of that. So on this one, we see we're going to start with 10x cubed plus 80, and we see a common factor of 10, so I'm going to factor that 10 out, and I get x cubed plus 8. Now what's different about this one is we have a cubed rather than a squared. So what that means is over here, it's still going to be 2 high, but now it's going to be 3 wide, all right? And that's because of the cubed. And so the x cubed goes right here, and the positive 8 goes way down here. And the idea is, because these are cubes, and 8, you can think of 8 as 2 times 2 times 2, all right? So that tells us we automatically know over here, you kind of have to memorize it. That's going to be an x and a 2, all right? And then right here, since this is an x, that means that's got to be x squared. And now we're just going to use logic here to kind of keep filling it in. And well, if this has to be a 2 because of that x cubed, I mean the difference of cubes, I mean the sum, gee whiz, sum of cubes. So if that's got to be a 2, that means this number here has to be a 4. So now we're just kind of using our logic. Well, if this is an x and that's a 4, that means right there has to be a 4x. Since this is a 2 and that's an x squared, so that means this spot right here is 2x squared. And then the idea is, since we only have the cube, that's the x cubed, and the 8, that means these internal terms have to cancel each other out. That means this is a 2x squared and this is a 4x. That's how we're going to get these things to cancel out. All right. Now, in order for them to cancel out, that means one has to be positive and the other has to be negative. So here's another thing you have to memorize. So first thing you had to memorize is, 8 is a cube, 2 times 2 times 2. That's why I chose to put the 2 here. The other thing you need to memorize is, since this is a plus, we know that the 2 is going to be a plus. All right, so if the 2 is a positive 2, that means this 8 is a positive 8 because it says so way over here. So that makes this 4 has to be positive. And since that 4 has to be positive, so positive 4 times x, that makes this 4x a positive 4x. Well, if that positive 4x needs to cancel out with this 4x right here, that means this 4x has to be negative. All right. And oh, by the way, we can fill in this missing value here. Since this is x, that means this value up here has to be a 2x. And sure enough, 2 times 2x gives you 4x. But we want a negative 4x, and this guy has to be a positive 2, so that by logic means this guy has to be a negative 2. Well, if that guy is a negative 2, that makes this guy negative 2x squared. And sure enough, that's how these guys cancel. That's how these guys cancel. That's how we have a positive 2 times a positive 4 gives us positive 8. We have an x times x squared gives us an x cubed. Everything is now working perfectly. And so our final factored form is 10 times x plus 2, that's this guy right here, times this huge trinomial right here. So that's going to be x squared minus 2x plus 4. And I'll save you the hassle and tell you right off the bat that this guy cannot be factored any further. All right, so here, first thing we're going to do is we're going to notice that we have a common factor of p in both cases, in both terms, and a common factor of q. So we're going to take out a p and a q, and that leaves us with 49p squared minus 64. If I take out a p and a q, so that's going to give p and a q. Oh, q squared. All right, so there's our first job. Now we're going to take this second term right here, and we're going to use the box method. It looks complicated, but it actually isn't. So we're going to put 49p squared here. We're going to put negative 64q squared here. And then, so we're going to notice that we've got some squares. 7 times 7 is 49. 8 times 8 is 64. Ignoring the signs for a second. So that gives us 7p and 7p, and it gives us 8q and 8q. And since we have no middle terms, these guys have to cancel out. So we've got 56pq here, and we've got 56pq here, but since they have to cancel out, that means one has to be positive, the other has to be negative, which means this is a negative 8, and this is a positive 8, or 8q. And so there's how these middle terms cancel out. And so our final factored form is pq times 7p plus 8q times 7p minus 8q, and that is our factored form. All right, so here we've got 4m cubed minus 20m squared plus 64m, and I see that we have an m in all three cases, and 4 is a common factor in all three terms. So we're going to factor out a 4m, which leaves us with m squared minus 5m plus, oh gosh, well, let's see, 16. All right, is that right? 16. All right, so now we're going to take this second part right here and put that in the box method. And of course the m squared goes there, and the positive 16 goes there. And we're going to think of all the ways you can make 16. Well, you could do 1 times 16, you could do 2 times 8, you could do 4 times 4. And when I'm looking, none of these options are going to give us a 5 in any way. None of them. So that tells us we are done, and this is as factored as we can get, right there. All right, so on this one, this is actually a little on the tricky side. We're going to factor out a common term of, or common factor of 7x squared, because both of these numbers are divisible by 7. So 175 divided by 7 gives me, let's see, 25. And then x to the second power, because I'm factoring out x squared. And then we have minus, and then 252 divided by 7. Let's see, that's 36. So that's 36. And we're left with y squared, because we're factoring out the x squared. So now you see that we have a difference of squares. So when I draw my box here, and I know that I've got 25x squared here, and I've got negative 36y squared there. So that's 5x times 5x, and this is 6y times 6y, which means when we fill in our internal terms here, we've got 30xy and 30xy, but these internal terms here have to cancel out because we have none over here. We just have a binomial, not a trinomial. So that means one of them has to be a negative, the other has to be a positive, which means that's negative 6y, and this is positive 6y, and there is our factored form. You've got 7x squared times 5x plus 6y and 5x minus 6y, and there is our factored form. So the first thing we see is that we have a common factor of 5. So I'm going to take out that common factor of 5, and I get 64a cubed plus b cubed. All right. Now again, I want us to notice that 64 is 4 times 4 times 4. And then, of course, these are cubes, so we have a sum of 2 cubes. So what does that mean? That means we're going to draw a box, but our box is going to be 2 by 3. And we know that 64a cubed is going to go here, and we know that b cubed is going to go here. Now, because we just have to memorize this part, since 64 is 4 times 4 times 4, that means we're going to put 4a right here, and we're going to put a b right here. And we also have to remember that because this is a plus, that this b has to be a plus. All right, so there we go. It's a positive b. So now we're ready to fill in and use logic to fill in the entire rest of this box. If this is b, that means this has to be b squared. Now right now we're not worried about the signs. We know eventually these internal terms have to cancel out, but right now we're just filling in the basic values, the absolute values. Well, if this is a 4a, that means up here that has to be a 16a squared. And if that's a 16a squared, then down here that's got to be a 16a squared b. And if, let's see, if this is a 4a, all the way over here means that's got to be a 4ab squared. And then because we know that these guys have to cancel out, that means this is going to be a 16a squared b, and this is going to be a 4ab squared. But now we know now we're going to focus on the signs. All right, so we know that because this is a positive b, and we need a positive b, I should have had a positive b cubed, because it says so right here. That means this b squared has to be positive. All right. Well, if that's positive, that makes this guy mandatory. He's positive. Well, if that has to be a positive, then in order for them to cancel out, this guy must be a negative. All right. And by the way, we need to fill in this value. Well, if this is a 4a, well, 4 times 4 gives us 16. We have an a, we need a squared, so we need to multiply it by another a. And we need a b, so that's got to be 4ab. All right, so now, and sure enough, look at this. B times 4ab gives us 4ab squared. Now, we need it to be a negative, and this guy has to be a positive, so that means this 4ab must be a negative. So see how we're just using logic. And then, if this guy is a negative, and we're multiplying by a positive, that makes this guy negative. And sure enough, these guys cancel out, these guys cancel out, and we are left with our new factors. This and this are our factors. So we get 5 times 4a plus b times 16a squared minus 4ab plus b squared. Whew! And I'm going to save you the hassle and let you know that this cannot be factored any further. All right, and this one, we've got a common factor of 5 and a b squared. So you got 5b to the 4th plus 20b cubed plus 20b squared. And we can see that we have a common factor of 5 in all of them and a b squared in all of them. So that leaves us with b squared. If we factor out a 5b squared, we get b squared plus 4b plus 4. And that is our first step. So now here we're going to draw our box. We go back to a nice normal 2 by 2. So we know that's got to be b squared. We know that's got to be a positive 4. So using logic, b times b gives us b squared. And here we're going to try 2 times 2. And that gives us 2b and 2b. And because we want everything to be positive, That means that's got to be positive 2, that's got to be positive 2. That makes everything positive, and sure enough, that works out. So our final factored form is 5b squared times b plus 2 times b plus 2, and we are done.